Hello, my name is Dr. Sandra Rios, and today I'm going to talk about document design. In this PowerPoint slide, you'll see two versions of the same document. On the left, we have the information without any kind of formatting of the information. On the right-hand side, we have the same information as on the left hand, but you'll see that there's been some formatting done to create a more attractive and readable design for the document. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that you can have great information. It can be well organized, but if you just depend upon textually presenting the information, you will find that you might not be as effective with conveying your information to an audience as you would if you also took and added design elements such as you see on the right hand side of the page that involve using a header, or here on this the notes on this page, it calls it a masthead, that says that it identifies the subject and the source of the information. And also, this document on the right hand side uses headings and white space and a footer which provides additional information about the organization, the address. So when you create a technical document, you should ask yourself, how can I use design elements such as headings, graphs, charts, pictures, white space, fonts? We're going to be talking about all these design elements in a few minutes in the rest of this PowerPoint presentation. So the question is, how can I use these to convey the information that I have organized more effectively? Here are 5 general guidelines for document design. The first one is, know what decisions you can make. If you're working for an organization, a company, or an industry, many times the company or the organization will have pre-designed templates that you have to use and follow. The documents will be already designed, so you cannot change the design of the original document. You just have to fill in the information. In this case, you have very limited choice as to what kinds of design decisions you can make. On the other hand, you might work for a company in which you have total freedom to design the document in any way that you want to. Know at what side of the spectrum, total freedom or no freedom at all, do you have to make decisions. If you have the freedom to make design decisions, then choose design that fits your situation. In some cases, it can be as simple as deciding whether you're writing a memo or a letter, or if you're writing a report, maybe you have a lot of freedom in which to design and organize your information. But choose a design that fits your situation. Plan your design from the beginning. Know what your design is, what the overall picture is going to be like, what the final product is going to appear, how it's going to appear. Do know that from the very beginning so that you have a clear picture of what you're working towards. Tell your reader what the organizational design of your document is going to be like. In other words, let your reader know what they can expect in the rest of your document. And keep your design consistent. Okay, if you're going to use 2 levels of headings, each level of heading should look the same. And you should use 2 or 3 levels of headings throughout the whole document. If you're going to be using a specific font, use the font or the typeface throughout the whole document. If you're going to use certain colors for certain sections, use the same colors. In other words, don't switch your design in the middle of the document. Your reader will get used to it and will expect certain ways of presenting information. Make sure that you're consistent when you use these design elements. Here are some specific design elements that you will find are available to you through Microsoft Word. For example, templates. I, in class, showed you how Microsoft Word provides templates for writing memos or creating brochures. Okay, so you can use a template, and a template will have already partially formatted your document for you. If you are going to print your document on paper, I would like to mention to you that there are thousands of different types of paper that you can choose from. And I will be discussing the paper, the weight, the size, the texture, fiber content of paper a little ways down the line in this PowerPoint presentation. Spacing, line length, the use of lists, fonts, or typefaces. I should talk about these all. I should not talk about them in depth right now because I will be discussing them in more detail a little further down the line in this PowerPoint presentation. Also, in-text, emphasis, and headings. These are all specific design elements that you need to decide upon before you actually start writing or formatting your final draft. Let's look at templates. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, businesses often have commonly written documents that share a common format. Microsoft Word provides writers with templates, but I want to show you how some very popular sources of information have produced or created an image that is associated with their written documents. Okay, so for example, National Geographic has this standard iconic cover, the yellow border, the text with a heading, National Geographic with a font. So when you see the border with the text, immediately you associate it with National Geographic. Okay, so many businesses have, as I said, common formats for reports, for correspondence, for websites, which the reader associates a certain look or feel with that particular organization or company. I'll show you some more examples. For example, these logos. Obviously on the left we have the logo for Microsoft, and on the right we have the logo for Apple. As soon as you see these logos, you associate them with the business or the company. And you have no choice. If you're working for that company, you have to use those logos. Here's some stationery. Many, if not all, companies have what we call letterhead stationery. And the letterhead is the name of the organization with their logo. And on the left-hand side, I used a letter from the Federación Puertorriqueña de Fútbol. This is their official letterhead stationery. All their correspondence is printed on this stationery. On the right-hand side, you can see the official stationery for the Department of English. All official correspondence for the Department of English goes out on this kind of stationery. And these design templates are used for these businesses. I cannot change them. Okay, if I were to create a new letterhead logo for the Federación Puertorriqueña de Fútbol or the Department of English, I might lose my job. I cannot make any changes. These decisions have been made and the templates established. Paper. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you decide to print your correspondence or your reports or your proposals on paper, you need to decide what kind of paper to use. I have no problem deciding what kind of paper to use. I just go to Sam's and I buy the cheapest paper I can find. If it's paper and it's cheap, I use it. However, that might not always be the case. If you are printing out your resume, for example, you might want to use a more expensive paper with a fiber content that is not the kind of fiber content you would find in cheap paper. If you're printing out your master's thesis or your doctoral dissertation, graduate studies actually requires you to use paper with a certain amount of cotton fiber content because it lasts longer. Paper is also classified according to how white or bright it is. There's different weights of paper. Obviously, paper comes in different sizes. We're most familiar with the letter size paper, which is 8.5 by 11 inches, but there's also legal size paper, which is longer. Paper comes in lots of different colors, and of course, it costs different. Different papers cost different amounts of money. The fact of the matter is, all of these considerations will affect the kind of paper you buy. And again, if you're working for business, they might have already purchased paper and you just use the paper that they provide for you. White space. White space is a very important part of any document design. White space is defined as all the space that does not have text. White space frames the text or the graphics. It focuses the eye on the text or the graphics, and it also gives eyes a rest. It has a real psychological function in the sense that when you see a page that's filled with text, that's crowded with information, it looks intimidating and hard to read. Psychologically, you might not want to have to cope with it. So that using white space it makes the page more restful, not so busy and difficult, and not so intimidating. If you look at this particular screen right here, you'll see that I use a lot of white or light blue space. The heading is framed by it, then the subheading white space is framed out by white space, and then each one of these bulleted points also uses white space to frame it. And it makes it a lot easier to read, especially as I'm explaining what white space is. White space can be created not through margins, using margins. Okay, how wide or narrow margins does increases or decreases the white space. Headings create white space. Paragraphing or paragraphs create white space. Indentation and light spacings are all ways in which you can create frame text and graphics with white space. Margins. Let's just talk briefly about margins. Most margins are preset by Microsoft Word, and they're between 1 to 1.5 inches for most documents. If you are going to bind, in other words, the word in Spanish for binding is encuadernar, your document, you need to leave more space on the left-hand side of the document for the bindery. Okay, there's nothing worse than putting, stapling or binding your document, and then you find that the text is in the crease or the crack of the page. So leave more space. If you're going to bind, you're probably going to want to leave at least 1.5 to 2 inches of space on the left-hand side of the page. Most documents look attractive if you leave more space on the bottom of the page than on the top, but you should center your document as much as possible. Another decision you would have to make in relationship to margins is whether or not your margins are going to be justified or ragged. For example, on this slide, the text is left justified. In other words, by justified, I mean it has an even edge. All the words are evenly aligned. Whereas on the right side, we have a ragged right edge. In other words, the words don't end on the same line. They're not aligned on the right. So they're ragged, they're uneven. Okay, so whether you decide to have your margins justified or ragged makes a difference on how much white space your document, or how your document uses white space. Here are some examples of margins. Okay, and this comes from Microsoft Word. There's 4 ways you can line up text or justify text. The first example is where your text is left justified with a ragged right edge. Below that, we have, well, let's not do below, let's do to the right. We have a text that is centered, okay? And when you center a text, you have ragged left and right edges. Centering is sometimes used for headings and title pages, but usually not used for the body of text in the page. You can also have text that is justified on both the left and the right side, okay? And this is typical of books and other printer materials, as it says here, printed on high resolution printers. Okay, so a justified text is a text that is justified, is aligned on both the right and the left side. And finally, and I'm sorry that I'm not doing this in the order in which it's presented on the page, but you can have text that is justified only on the right but has a ragged left edge. So going from top to bottom, the first text is left justified with a ragged right margin. The one below that is right justified with a ragged left margin. And then up on the upper right-hand side, we have a text that is justified on both the left and the right side. And below that, we have a text that is centered and that has both ragged left and right edges. How you decide to format your documents depends upon you, and it depends upon the document and the effect you want. Headings are an extremely important way of creating white space. And when we talk about headings, we talk about levels of headings. Now, headings can be formatted using Microsoft Word. At the top of the page, and I can't explain to you because seems like everybody's version of Word has a different way of accessing headings, but most of the time, Microsoft Word will have a drop-down menu, as you can see on the screen below, in which normal is, in this case, Cambria 12-point font, all right? But you can change the heading, the formatting of your text, and especially the formatting of your headings, by dropping down the menu and deciding or clicking on whether you want level 1 headings, level 2 headings, or level 3 headings. So when you create headings, and remember, I define headings as labels. They're labels. A heading is a label. It identifies or labels the subject matter of a specific section or chapter of a document, all right? So headings are an important feature of longer documents. You can use them in a 2 or 3 page memo, or you can use them in a 2 or 3 page 100-page book or report. But whatever it is, headings help your reader to identify the content of that section. You can have different levels of headings, and headings can also be used to outline the document or to generate tables of content. There are different ways of formatting or organizing headings. Okay, so for example, you want to have headings that use the same sentence structure. In other words, you want your headings to be parallel. Parallel headings use the same sentence structure. And the reason why you want your headings to be parallel is because they are easier for your user to follow. So in this box up here in this graphic, you will see that an example of non-parallel headings, graph modifications, data selection updatings. Each sentence, each heading has a different sentence structure, whereas on the right-hand side, you have parallel structures in which each heading starts with a progressive verb. modifying a paragraph, changing the data, adding or deleting columns, changing, so the sentence structure is similar for each heading. Here are some common types of headings. For example, questions are useful in headings in a brochure. You can use a series of questions. What does a gypsy moth look like? How can we protect trees from gypsy moths? How often should we spray? So these are all headings that are parallel in sentence structure because they're all questions. Here we have verb phrases. Okay, we have adding a text, selecting the data, selecting the type of graph, adding a title. Okay, here, the next example, we can have verb phrases as imperatives. The imperatives are commands. Make your attendance policy clear. Explain your grading policy. Announce your office hours. Supply names of texts to be purchased. Go over assignments and their due dates. Each one of these headings is a verb phrase, but it's a specific kind of a verb phrase. It's an imperative. And below, short sentences are often useful and can be used in memos and reports. So parallel headings use the same sentence structure. Here are headings that are common in proposals. They're key words, and if you're writing a proposal for your final project, you should take into account that you might be wanting to use these kinds of headings: project summary, project description, rationale and significance, plan of work, facilities and environment, personnel and budget. These are all key words commonly used in a proposal. Lists. Lists are always an effective way of organizing and presenting information. However, whenever you use a list, always use a lead-in. A lead-in is a short introductory phrase or sentence that introduces the list. Lists should have 3 or more items. Okay, I put must have 3 or more items, but I'm afraid that I have seen situations in which lists have had 2 items. Ideally, a list should have 3 or more items. Lists can be bulleted, like this list here, or they could be numbered. Here's an example of a short paragraph that makes it so much easier to read when it is in list form. So here we have a set of instructions on drawing product help. All right, it has a brief lead-in. The paragraph has a brief introductory phrase to draw a box, and then it's all in paragraph form. That's the one on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, instructions in list form are easier to read and follow. So we have the heading, drawing product help, then we have the brief lead-in to draw a box, and then 4 items that are listed in the order that they should be carried out, that make it a lot easier for the reader to follow the instructions. Fonts. These are fonts, also known as typefaces. There's 2 basic types of fonts, serif and sans serif. Sans serif, as you can tell, has little extra lines, or I call them guindalejos in Spanish, little curlicues or tails. Okay, so those little extra lines or tails are called serifs. And then there's sans serif. Okay, these types of fonts don't have the little tails or serifs. Tips for good document design. Leave ample margins. Use blank space to group or organize information. Set line spacing for easy reading. Use medium line length. In other words, you shouldn't have really long lines in your document. In order to reduce line length, you would then have wider margins. Use a ragged right margin. Bragged right margins are easier to read than justified margins. Here, again, side by side are examples of the same document, but one of them on the right-hand side is much easier to read because it uses headings and white space to organize and present information. This document does the same thing. It has the same information but organized using headings and white space. It makes the information much easier to read and restful on the eyes. I'm going to be putting more information about document design, especially using graphics, digital photos, tables, and charts to organize information. But for right now, I think you get the basic information that you need to know in order to do your document design assignment for this class, English 32-36. Thank you very much for your attention.